insecurity in U.S. households reached record highs in July, with almost 30 million Americans reporting that they did not have enough to eat in the last week. And since additional help came to an end on Friday, millions more are going to feel the impact. In a true sign of the times, CNBC produced a little tutorial on pandemic budgeting and how to make ends meet.
A federal law, the CARES Act, provided for an extra $600 a week in jobless benefits through July 31st. Now, how do you make ends meet without that boost? The first step is to follow a pandemic budget. Keep track of every penny that you spend and cut out any expense that's not essential. Next, contact all of your lenders and your creditors. Look for payment assistance programs. You want to explain your situation and ask for reduced or deferred payments, at least for now.
Professor of economics at Bard College and author Pavlina Tcherneva joins us now to discuss where we are with the economy. Pavlina, good to see you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So with the expiration of this extra $600 and this shocking news that Congress may not even act to take, intermediate steps to provide relief to working families, how bad is it out there? What are we looking at?
Well, we already are seeing the pain, but I think it's not over. I think it's a complete delusion to think that reopening will recover the economy. Reopening is not recovery. We still have a raging pandemic, and we have mass unemployment, and people now are experiencing not only food insecurity, but also housing insecurity. And the prospect of not providing or renewing the income assistance or just removing that lifeline means more pain, means defaults, means bankruptcies. We are really removing the floor from the economy, and that's the minimum that we need to do.
Yeah, lay that out just a little bit more, because I feel like I'm losing my mind over here. You see these numbers, 30 million Americans are going hungry, the number of people who are housing insecure, the number of people who are 30 million Americans who are relying on those unemployment benefits that they just allowed to lapse without even coming close to making a deal. What could this ultimately look like? What are we heading for right now?
I mean, we've already seen dramatic numbers. We have never seen the kind of unemployment rates that we experienced in the last 3 months. We also saw a collapse in economic activity. You don't need to be an expert to know that when there's a raging epidemic, people are not going to go to the establishments. They're not going to be comfortable resuming regular economic activity, send their kids to school. And so nothing has changed really from 5 months ago. It is the path of the pandemic that determines the path of the economy. We needed and required to slow down economic activity in order to control the virus, which we have failed to do. But slowing down economic activity doesn't have to happen without assistance. And we already demonstrated that we have both the funding and the capacity to provide support for people who are at a threat of losing their job. So what we're looking at, we are actually looking at more layoffs. Even if you just compare the numbers, we passed a budget of $2.2 trillion to sustain the economy for several months. That was a very large support for the economy. It wasn't targeted very well, but nonetheless, it did allow people to pay their bills. So while economic activity collapsed, incomes actually did increase. Now imagine removing that income. And so now whatever little support there was in this really collapsing economy will go away, which means more unemployment. So we are looking at record levels and increasing levels of unemployment and decline in economic activity.
One of the things I'm curious about is sort of the specific ways in which we address this from a policy standpoint, because when the CARES Act initially passed, you had these unemployment checks that were cut with this idea that somehow this would be temporary. We're trying to get ourselves over this initial response. But now we're in a situation where, the economy is not going to come back this year. I think it's pretty safe to say. And so as we're looking at addressing this further, the push is for unemployment insurance. But I'm wondering if there's something to be said for just continued direct stimulus payments that aren't tied to employment, maybe providing a more equitable approach to kind of getting everyone back up on their feet.
Yeah, I think any talk of V-shaped recovery was wishful thinking. I think we knew this from the beginning. If once you see the levels of unemployment that we had not seen since the Great Depression, you know the economy is on a very difficult path to recovery. What do we do now? It is the case that we cannot send people back in droves into the labor market. That is economic malpractice. We cannot afford to actually exacerbate the public health problem. The second thing to keep in mind, we can't keep removing the support for folks in hope that they will be incentivized to go and work when the jobs are not there. So I think that this moment does call for continued income support as needed, widespread income support, so that folks can stay at home. But also we need to start thinking now about what a recovery would look like. I really don't see any credible plan out there. I mean, we're just really fighting over crumbs, just the basic income assistance that people need to be able to pay their bills. But I don't see a credible plan to transition folks back into employment. Firms will not do the job. They have already seen loss in sales, loss in profits. The longer the economy suffers this malaise and mass unemployment, the incentives will not be there and firms will fold. So somebody has to pick up the responsibility to create employment and investment, and that will need to be the federal government to be able to transition folks to safe and stable employment when the economy has gotten a hold of the virus.
Can you be a little more specific about what you mean there? Because I think the point is really well taken. We've got to deal with the immediate, still, really critical crisis situation that we are in now, get people the funds they need just to be able to stay in their housing, be able to literally eat and feed themselves and feed their children. But this thing is not going to just, snap back to normal once there is a vaccine, if there is a vaccine. So what does the next phase look like? What do people have to plan for when you say, sparking job creation? Like, what does that specifically mean?
Well, the responsibility will fall on the government. We already see that it is the government that is shouldering the response to the pandemic, or the costs from not responding the right way to the pandemic or to the economic malaise. So we just have to accept that this will be the responsibility and the task for the federal government to undertake. What would that look like? Mobilization. That was the requirement back in March. That is the requirement today. We still have problem with production of masks, equipment, of adequate testing. We will need to start creating jobs robustly and boldly. That means public investment programs. I would prefer to see very large infrastructure investment programs very much akin to the New Deal to transition us back to normalcy, programs that guarantee employment to folks who need it. It is all well and good and absolutely necessary to provide income assistance, extend the unemployment insurance so that people do not fall into absolute destitution. But there is going to be a light at the end of the tunnel, and we don't have a plan how to emerge out of this pandemic without some plan for job creation. And I think the fastest way to do it is for the government to create the jobs directly.
So we've been very focused, and Congress has been very focused, I think rightly so, on the employment crisis, because that's most directly connected to what we're dealing with. But one of the things I do worry about looking at sort of the economy as a whole is that you're seeing a lot of small businesses close in ways that's just transferring power to these massive corporations who are getting through this largely unscathed and who can comply, with a lot of the social distancing requirements better than small firms. And so as we go forward with this, we need to be focused on employment, but is there also a focus on the small business side, on the employer side, not in a corporate crony capitalist way, but in a way that actually preserves the diffusion of power so we're not just handing it over to these mega corporations?
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, we certainly could have done better job with the payroll protection provisions and provided more support to small businesses. That was a good idea, to provide loans so that they can keep people on the payroll and that they don't have to fold and shutter their businesses. Now, we already are seeing reports from small businesses that are saying that with or without reopening, they are at existential threat of closing down because people are just not going to those establishments, small restaurants, small mom and pop shops. Folks are staying at home. So how do we support them? I think that a jobs program, a local direct employment jobs program, is one of the best stimulus that we can provide to small businesses so we can revive our economies and our local communities, and so that there's a lot more patrons going to the small mom and pop shops when we're able to reopen.
Yeah, absolutely. Professor, always great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Next on Rising, federal agents have pulled out of Portland, Oregon. The Nation's Ken Klippenstein is going to tell us the result when Rising continues.